in honor of our special exhibit upstairs, God, Goats, and Pickup Trucks, the art of Maurice Schmidt, which will be on display till the end of the month here. So if you haven't gotten here yet, we're still available. Come on down to New Orleans. I'm just gonna do a quick introduction and then hop out of the way, and Laura will take it away. So Laura grew up in Burlington, North Carolina. She earned her undergraduate degree in art education from Appalachian State University in Boone, North Carolina, and her master's degree in art history from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Laura took further graduate level trainings in linguistics and anthropology and spent time in Papua New Guinea as a missionary. She has been with the San Angelo Museum of Fine Arts, where she is the curator and assistant director since 2012. I lied, I said I was going to give it right over to you. I have a little bit of housekeeping for our Zoom guests. We ask that you stay on mute for the duration of this program. Folks in person, we also ask that, don't yell out. And at the end, we are excited to take questions. Folks on Zoom, I will read your questions aloud. Folks in person, hands work really well. If folks on Zoom, you have any issues, you can message me privately and I'll help work it. I'm the MSJE account. Okay, now I'm actually going to turn it over to you, Laura. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Lindsay. Well, it's really an honor to be able to be here, to be invited to New Orleans. First of all, this is the second time I've been here. And I have to say it ranks right up there with Florence, Italy as one of my favorite places on the planet. So to be invited here is just a privilege. So coming to New Orleans, also being able to see your absolutely important and wonderful museum. It was just a privilege to tour the exhibits today, to tour the permanent exhibits as well as the temporary one. Seeing the art from our museum in a different context is something really special. And I have to compliment Tina on the job that she did on pulling the exhibit together, on displaying it, on interspersing Maurice's quotations with the artwork in just the right amount, in the right way, to make it just a really beautiful, compelling exhibit. And it's also an honor to be able to share the work from our museum's collection with New Orleans, with the world. We're really about getting our collections out there and allowing people to see them, and just being able to have it here is such a joy. But before I say anything else, I want to talk to Maurice and Becky. I know you're watching this on the recorded version, and I just want to say hello. And Maurice, what an honor it is to talk about your work. I can only hope that I can even slightly do it justice. Just how much it means to me. I hope that I'm able to impart even just a little bit. It's really a joy to be able to talk about Maurice's work, to be the caretaker of it. And I hope that I can pass that along some, and that if you have not seen the show upstairs, that you will definitely do so after this program. But I'll begin by telling you a little bit about our museum, the San Angelo Museum of Fine Arts. We are located in San Angelo, West Texas, which, depending on who you ask, is either Central West Texas or West Central Texas. Since I'm originally from North Carolina, I don't really have an opinion on the matter, but you can see we're right there. We're actually the largest city in the United States, population of about 100,000, that is not on an interstate highway. Interesting piece of trivia. And of course, there are those in the community who are fighting for the interstate. There are those in the community that say, no, we don't want an interstate. We'll see how that ends up. We might end up with two. I don't know. But while this map is up, I'm also going to point out two other locations for you. Maybe I should do this with the cursor for Zoom. Okay, let me see. Oh, good, there it is. Okay, Kingsville, where Maurice lived and worked for over 40 years, is right around Corpus Christi in South Texas. So, oh dang, where'd it go? There it is. So I would say it's maybe, if I remember correctly, maybe 20 or 30 miles inland from Corpus Christi. And Coastal South Texas is very similar climate-wise to New Orleans. So you know what the climate here is like? It's very similar. The other location I'm going to point out is right around here, New Braunfels, where Maurice was born. Come on in. Where Maurice was born and grew up is just northeast of San Antonio. And I'm not doing a great job with the pointer here, but I am giving you a generalization. So that is in the Texas Hill Country. Okay, next slide. This is our museum, the San Angelo Museum of Fine Arts, and its present building was built in 1999, and its architecture it's iconic. It's actually published in international publications about museum architecture. It stands out in the community. Some people say it looks like a saddle. Some people say it looks like a covered wagon. Some people say it looks like a Pringles potato chip. I'm not sure any one of those particular things was the inspiration for the architects, but in any case, it stands out and it's a landmark. And our gallery ceilings are 40 feet high. It's just an amazing space. So the building was built in '99, but we weren't always there. The museum opened in 1985 at Fort Concho National Historic Landmark. It's actually right down the street from us, and it's one of the best preserved frontier forts in America. It was built, the first buildings were built in 1867 and 1868. And from 1985 to 1989, 1985 to 1999, when our building was built, the museum was located in the quartermaster building. So that building is pictured on the outside in the lower left, and the interior of the gallery here on the right. That is actually one of the oldest buildings at the fort, and therefore one of the oldest buildings in San Angelo. And when it was refurbished, it was done so for the museum. So it is still set up as a gallery space, which is a very fortunate thing, considering that that's where our present exhibit is located. And the reason for that is we are replacing that beautiful copper roof this year. There was just a really horrible hailstorm in 2020. It was, okay, Texas gets bad hailstorms. This was the worst. The hail was this big, and it had little knobby things all over it. It looked like the COVID virus, which was very appropriate for 2020. And our area was like the worst hit. It totally battered the seam on the roof, and it has been raining in our lobby for 3 years. Finally, we got a settlement from the insurance company. Finally, we can begin the replacement. Anyway, long story. But because of that, we are back at Fort Concho temporarily. This exhibit is a contemporary art exhibit. It's two Texas artists who make what I would call op art. So it messes with your eyes and with your head. If you look at it from different angles at different distances and different lights, it changes. And they're just really doing very innovative things, both with painting and with printmaking. So our exhibit program is encyclopedic. So we try to show contemporary art, but we try to bring art from multiple cultures, from multiple time periods, and in the exhibit program, which changes every 2 to 3 months. So we definitely keep busy with that. Before I get to collections, I'll talk a little bit about just really our museum's commitment to community and education. Our education programs see about 33,000 children a year. And in a place with a population of 100,000, that's pretty good. Most, I would say the vast majority of the programs are offered for free. And they are offered from the smallest kids, I would say age of 3, up to high school, adulthood. And then just in the past 2 years, we opened the Concho Play Studio, which is adult education for play and ceramics. So people in the community can come and take even a 6-week-long course in learning how to throw on the wheel and learning clay sculpture, or they could come for just a date night and make something special around a theme. In 2013, we did our first in plein air Texas festival / competition where artists from all over the country and world were juried in. We brought 30 of them to San Angelo. They stayed with host families. They stayed with for a week, and they painted in plein air. They painted in the open air what they saw. They painted on the ranches. They painted downtown. They painted everywhere. And what I really love about this program is that as the artists are there working, we really encourage people to come up and talk to them, to see what they're doing. And what it does is it really enables those of us who live in San Angelo every day to see it through a different set of eyes, actually 30 some different sets of eyes. And also it's integrated into our education programs, both adult education and children's education. Our commitment to the community won us the National Museum Service Award in 2003, presented at a ceremony at the White House. So our museum is very, very proud of that. However, our big deal is the National Ceramic Competition, which we have been doing since 1986. When our museum first opened, and also, I mean, same is true now, a small institution like ours cannot compete with a bigger one for, say, something like European painting to be our focus area. There was a vibrant arts community in San Angelo when the museum arrived. It's even more vibrant now. Part of that vibrant community was a potter named Roger Allen and an art center that he founded. So we had these local potters. We also had a community that was in a large part employed by a ceramic tile manufacturer. They're not there in San Angelo anymore. But between Monarch Tile, between the old Chicken Farm Art Center, and between Angelo State University and their ceramics program, ceramics was just part of our community. And also, you know, really any place you go, when you look back far enough into the history of the place, you're going to find pottery and ceramics. So it just made sense. It was also an emerging area for artists. So we started offering this national competition. It's open to artists from all over North America, Mexico, Canada, and the United States. An independent juror selects about 100 pieces, 100 works. And we have, like I said, let's see, we've been doing this since 1986. It was every year for about 10 years, got to be too much. And now it's every 2 years. So our next one is coming up in 2024. But this shows our galleries. Again, it's just an amazing space. That ceiling goes up 40 feet. The floors are mesquite, end grain cut mesquite, local materials. And so out of the ceramics competition, the main focus area of our collection developed. And so it started out as contemporary American ceramics, which we were acquiring from the competition every year, then every 2 years. Well, as collectors started finding out about us, the area expanded. So now we've got world ceramics, we've got historical ceramics. So we've got this beautiful Japanese Amari ware platter right here front and center. And then the lady in the pink ballerina costume, she's all clay, except for her tutu. The sculptor who made her was working from an actual model, a woman in her mid-90s in a rest home named Lola. And as the sculptor was working on her portrait, on her face, Lola said, "I want to be a pink ballerina." And so there she is. She's a pink ballerina. Everybody absolutely loves her. And every time I walk by and see her out of my peripheral vision, she scares the living daylights out of me. In 2021, we published this book about our collection. We're so proud of this too. We had a grant to do this catalog, and we have sent it pretty much to every library and university that has a ceramics program that we could think of. And we sell them, we give them away. We really try to promote it, but it's a beautiful publication. It too has won awards, but the fact that we were able to actually publish this academic kind of coffee table book about our collection was a real milestone. second focus area of our collections, Spanish colonial and 19th century Latin American art. This is also an area that touches on the history of our region. Texas was once part of Spain, and after that, part of Mexico. So this is one of the masterpieces we have. It's a smaller one, but it's just absolutely beautiful. Jose de Paez, Our Lady of Carmel from around 1760. And these wonderful masterpieces, we have Cristobal de Villalpando on the right, Antonio de Torres on the left, and of course my Spanish pronunciation is not good, but these guys were two of the greatest masters of the Mexican Baroque period. If you want to hear later about how they ended up at our museum, I would be glad to tell you. Thank goodness they ended up with us. And the El Paso Museum of Art, which also is known for their Spanish colonial collection, these pieces from our collection have been on long-term loan there since 2019. Third focus area of our permanent collection is Texas art. And I like to show this piece just because it's crazy. So this guy, Bart Mann, he was a San Angelo artist. He actually, his career was spent as a businessman. And after he was retired, he was visiting New York City. He went to the Metropolitan Museum. He saw the Rospigliosi cup by Benvenuto Cellini from the Baroque period. He said, I'm going to learn how to cast gold. So he came back to San Angelo. A dentist showed him how to cast gold. So between what he learned from the dentist, what he taught himself, and what he learned working with local jewelers and a local sculptor, he started making things like this. He crafted gifts of state for the Johnson administration. He made absolutely just beautiful, unique jewelry designs that one of the stores in town still sells. And this, the Nautilus shell chalice and a few other pieces he made particularly for his family, just for fun. And they're the ones that we have in our collection. So Texas art being that third focus area, both early and contemporary Texas art, I think is the reason that we found out about Maurice Schmidt. And we were approached several years ago by Sandra Huff. She was the Schmidt's friend and neighbor in Kingsville, and they're working with her. They've delegated her to reach out to various organizations, museums, institutions, galleries, and find good homes for Maurice's art. And I'll tell you why they're doing that now, because for those 40 odd years of his career, he wasn't thinking of making a name for himself. He was focused on his family. He was focused on making his art, and he was focused on his teaching. And only since he retired, since he and Becky are getting older, they've moved to a retirement home near Austin. They're looking to ensure his legacy as an artist. So we were approached by Sandy, and she brought us a CD-ROM of images of Maurice's work. And she brought us a copy of this book where Maurice has written about his art and his life. And there were hundreds of images on that disc. There are so many works that Maurice has done. They're in various locations. They're in storage. They're in his house in Kingsville. They're in his family's home. They're in his home now in Austin. Some of these paintings have paintings on the back of them. There are so many paintings. Just because he's an artist, he can't help himself. He creates. And this is just to kind of give you an idea of how overwhelming it was. Okay, we have a CD-ROM, we have a book. The director at that time and I, pick up the book, we're starting to look through it, we load the CD and we're like, whoa, it was overwhelming. But it also just blew my hair back. I thought, why have we not heard of Maurice? And of course, I think I was able to explain that a little bit by saying, well, he wasn't focused on making a name for himself, but just there's so much beauty in it. There's so much depth. There's so much genius. And we knew right away we were looking at something remarkable. And this is just in picture form, and pictures do not do his works justice. In the end, just working from pictures, we chose 56 pieces for our collection that Maurice and his wife Becky so graciously donated to us, a number of paintings, a number of works on paper, prints, watercolors, drawings. And then in September of 2021, I had the privilege of working with one of my fellow staff members. Hello, come on in. To actually go to Kingsville and to pick up the art and to bring it back to San Angelo. And we had this gallery exhibit from September 24th of 2021 to March 30th of the following year. And even this, as big as our gallery space is, we weren't able to show all of the works. And it was a mixture of the paintings, of the works on paper, of the prints. Here's another view of that gallery show. And you also get a feel for the scale of his works, which you don't get in pictures either. You don't realize how big they are. So in conjunction with the exhibit, we commissioned a film to be made about Maurice and his art. We hired Vanessa Reiser, a filmmaker from Austin. This movie actually was featured at the Austin Jewish Film Festival. It was the only Texas entry in the whole thing, which completely surprised me, but it was still pretty great to be able to go there to Austin, to the film festival for that. A lot of the footage in the film taken from interviews that Maurice's son Joshua did with him a few years ago. And boy, I am so thankful that they did that. I mean, just what a treasure for the world to have that. How many of you have seen the exhibit upstairs? Did you have a chance to watch the film? Did you see the whole film? I recommend that you do. Now, even if you don't want to sit in the gallery and watch the 30-minute movie, you can watch it on Vimeo. You can watch it online, because I feel like an imposter standing up here and talking about this, because the best authority on any artist's artwork is the artist himself. And Maurice's words say it all. In his book, these are also, I noticed these are on sale in the gift shop. Between Maurice's book and the film that was made, it just expresses so beautifully what he's about, what his work is about. And a lot of my material draws on what he said. So we called the exhibit Majesty and Tenderness. And of course, the film has the same title. And we called it that because of something he said about Jewish synagogue rituals. He mentions in his artist statement the majesty and the tenderness of Jewish synagogue ritual, how much it meant to him, and just how much he tried to capture that in his artworks. You know, some people would make a distinction between religious subjects and non-religious subjects, but in Maurice's art, there is no distinction. Everything is a religious subject, because yes, you have actual religious rituals depicted, or you have scenes from scripture or other Jewish traditions depicted. Yes, those are religious works, but so is this. This is a guy harvesting cotton, but to Maurice, it's sacred. And I'm going to read you just a little bit of a statement that his wife wrote in the foreword to this book. And it's just about how Maurice sees the world. As Maurice observes a truth or beauty or parallel or makes an analogy, he's swept away to another place. Seeing beauty, he becomes unaware of time and space, like when in prayer. He does this for the sheer beauty and harmony in the truth, the relationship of things. In the depth of his involvement in these passionate moments, it is hard to get his attention. The onlooker sees that he is transported by this beauty as many thoughts are going through his mind. It's almost as if he is at one with the divine, not the worldly, but the sublime. He captures this in his portraits, agricultural scenes, and religious works. These everyday scenes are taken to another level. Maurice is at one with his maker in his art. He brings all these elements together, combining the here and now with God's larger infinite world and God's omniscient truths. There have been times when we were out in the car around dusk. Maurice spots a cotton harvester in the distance. I can see the beginning of his transformation once again, moving from the mundane to the sublime. Let's pull over, he says, with a peaceful urgency. I've got to see this machine as it moves across the field with the sky just exactly the way it is right now. I want to listen to the sound it makes. We pull over. I do see what he's getting at, to a point, that is. I can say that a part of me wants to get home and finish my mundane list, but I keep that to myself. For what I am in the presence of, what I am witnessing at this moment, albeit vicariously, is what is essential. So Maurice is seeing holiness, sacredness in, yes, the specific religious rituals, but also what's going on in day-to-day life. Work and agriculture, of course, are themes that recur throughout the Bible, used as metaphor and just day-to-day life. Then you have family scenes, togetherness, like this one, family pickup, the people and the animals just in community. And to Maurice, this is God's world. Everything points back to him. So everything, again, is a religious work. And so he's portraying the majesty and the tenderness in the specific religious rituals, but also just in day-to-day tasks, in the agricultural cycles, in a family spending time together. And in industry, Maurice really trains appear in a lot of his works. In the video, he compares the sound of the train horn to the sound of the shofar. And in this painting, I am captivated by this painting. I want to know what is happening here, especially this figure on the right. You could say, oh, okay, that's the conductor and he's got his arm out the window. But I don't know, it looks more like an angel wing to me. Who is this character in the shadow? Kind of makes me think of the figure that jumped out at Jacob and wrestled with him as he crossed the river Jabbok. What is this mysterious figure? I don't know. There's something mystical about this. Yes, it's some guys in a train, but there's so much more as well. And even the figures of the other folks in there who are more in the light than the figure on the right. There's just, what are they looking at? What are they doing? There's a lot more metaphysical going on in this painting. Before I begin with the next slides, I'm just going to say this, that Maurice's work is not derivative. He works in a style entirely his own. He certainly pulls together influences, thoughts, ideas, maybe from various artistic movements over the years. He's inspired by things, but he brings it all together and he makes it his own, in his own particular form of expression. One of the art, but as an art historian, of course, the things that are going to come to my mind are art historical references when I view his works. First, when I viewed them on the computer screen, but even more so in person, I thought of the post-impressionists and their vibrant, saturated color in their works, the way they portray figures, forms, and kind of this, it's not abstract, but it's abstracted. It's kind of a stylized means of showing things so that we see them maybe more as they really are than how they look. Also Gauguin and Van Gogh, Matisse, Pierre Bonnard, but also Marc Chagall. And this was, to me, a closer parallel. His vibrant use of color. Marc Chagall also was a Jewish artist who incorporated his faith, his deep faith obviously informed his work, but he has these kind of surreal and beautiful, joyful scenes and things happening with giant chickens and weddings, or a guy face to face with a goat and some upside down people in the background, and I in the village. But these just beautiful, delightful paintings about life, about community, about religion and faith. And then again, his use of color. Very much, Maurice's work very much made me think of Marc Chagall in that sense. But there was more than that. You know, maybe this is true in southern France, that there's something about the light. This is going back to the post-impressionists, that informs the way color is used. There's something about the light in Maurice's work as well, and more on this later. But there's also something of the genius of the old masters. So these works are by Peter Paul Rubens of the Baroque period, and something, their power and their tension. I think there's a little of that in Maurice's works. This subject, by the way, is a rodeo event called bulldogging, where the cowboy jumps off of the horse's back onto the back of the steer and wrestles it to the ground by the horns. And as far as I know, this is illegal everywhere except Texas. I really don't know, but it seems like it would be incredibly dangerous. However, the dynamism, the tension, the drama that's involved in that, Maurice really is able to portray it well. And Caravaggio, the master of chiaroscuro, the tension, the dramatic contrast between light and dark. Maurice has that use of light and dark in his works as well. So this is an older one from 1963 when he was living in San Antonio. And I didn't mean to do this when I put these up side by side, but look at the faces. So look at this old woman on the right of the Caravaggio, and look at these faces on the left in Maurice's picture. And you've got these kind of, well, the technical word is grotesque, but I would say more like characters that are depicted. But most of all the old masters, Maurice's work reminds me of Rembrandt. And this is one of Rembrandt's early works. It's got a lot of drama, a lot of external drama, and he painted a lot of religious subjects. Rembrandt also spent a lot of time in the Jewish quarter of Amsterdam. And this painting by Maurice, Torah Burial, this is not one that we have in our collection. It's one that's still in the family's collection. But again, just the drama of the scene, the dynamic composition. But more than the early works, though, Maurice's works make me think of Rembrandt's later works, where he was more interested in the internal drama. Not the external drama, but the internal, emotional, spiritual, eternal, what's going on in the metaphysical world. So we've got the return of the prodigal son on the right, and Moses breaking the tablets of the law on the left. And a lot of depictions of these same scenes. If you've studied art history at all, you will have seen them depicted in multiple other ways, most of them much more dramatically. But no, this is, I would say, more dramatic than the others, but just not physically so. And there's a tenderness, what Maurice calls a tenderness, in the depiction of the people, in the depiction of the relationships. And Maurice does the same thing in his works. Another reason I thought of Rembrandt is because Rembrandt was a master printmaker. These are, let's see, there's a dry point etching. Okay, one's in a dry point engraving and also an etching. And these are Maurice's works. And I'm going to tell you something about printmaking. It's not for sissies. It's really, really hard. It takes a lot of skill. It takes a lot of control, and it takes a whole lot of patience. And for somebody to master that, you've really got to be dedicated to your art and to your craft. I'll tell you a little bit about etchings and engravings. An etching is where you take a metal plate. I think copper is probably the most common. It's coated with some kind of sticky, yucky substance that's going to resist acid. And then you take a sharp tool and you scratch your design into it. After that, it gets put in an acid bath, and the acid etches away the lines where you've carved through the resist material, depending on the strength of the acid, depending on how long it's left in there, depending on, you may want to expose part of the plate longer than the rest of it. You're going to get deeper, wider lines. You're going to get more pronounced lines. Then you press, you take off whatever the sticky substance is, you press ink into the plate, wipe it off to a certain degree, to the desired amount, put the paper down on the plate, run it through the roller, run it through the press, and one of the hardest parts of all in printmaking is making, say, 5 or 6 or even more of those and make them the same. When you think of everything that goes into it to make multiples of the same image and make it even remotely similar is not easy at all. Here's some more of Maurice's prints. Absolutely love these. So I'll talk a little bit about his biography. I'm going to read these quotes to you. When I put this in my presentation, I did not know that you had Micah 6:8 on your wall, actually down the hallway. But I will read it to you from the prophet Micah chapter 6, verse 8. He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. And this next part is Maurice's dedication in this book. To my father and my mother of blessed memory, who brought me into life, who guided our steps with loving hands and our paths into the ways of God. Truth, righteousness, and loving kindness were their heritage and the milk and honey of their care. All my days, their remembrance goes before me. These were the values that Maurice was raised with, and it shows in his art and in his life. He was born and raised in New Braunfels, Texas, where his family owned a dry goods store and was run by his father and then his father's father before him. Also, as I mentioned, it's in the hill country of Texas, which is absolutely beautiful. One of the things Maurice mentions a lot in his writing is the colors of the hill country and how it inspired him. When he was 14, he started taking private art lessons with a local artist and antiques dealer, Mr. DeMuth. And I think even if his parents might have been a little disappointed that he wasn't going to take over the store, they were always loving and very supportive of what he wanted to do. And it was when he was 14 and started taking these classes that he really knew that art was his calling. It was what he was going to do with his life. One of the observations in his book that he makes is that until he took these classes, he didn't think what he was doing all his life had been art. You know, he'd been making drawings of things that interested him. He'd been drawing things from his imagination, things from books he read, illustrations, but that wasn't art. Art was in the classroom when you get this little ditto sheet and you have to color it in the lines. But when he started taking these classes with Mr. DeMuth, it really opened his eyes to, wow, I mean, this is what I am. This is what I've been doing all along. So this painting is from about the time he was 14. This was about the time that he was taking those classes. So I'm going to be honest with you. Sometimes the art world, especially the academic part of it, can be snobby and elitist. And at the time that Maurice was really discovering who he is as an artist, post-war abstraction was what was all the rage. It was what was avant-garde. And of course, those are artists like Jackson Pollock. Life magazine's a little mainstream for those avant-garde people, come on. Joseph Albers, things like this. Robert Motherwell. And of course, I have a great respect for these artists as well. But at the time that Maurice went to college, if you weren't painting in that post-war abstract style, you weren't taken seriously. But thankfully, Maurice went to the University of Texas at Austin that had a program that was a little bit more open-minded. And he studied, I think he phrased it, he took as many classes as he could with sculptor Charles Umlauf. And Charles Umlauf is just part of the pantheon of well-known Texas artists. Even if you've never heard of him, we've definitely heard of him in Texas. And he was a figurative sculptor. He worked in a figurative style, and Maurice knew also that he was a figurative artist. So with professors like Charles Umlauf, Maurice was free to explore that form of expression that he felt was him, really described him and his artistic voice. He was also introduced to the Mexican muralists while he was in college. This is a detail of a mural by Orozco. And it's a cool story of how Maurice happened to be walking by the student bookstore and saw kind of these colors out of the corner of his eye. It was a book about Orozco in the bookstore, and he went in and bought it, and of course was introduced. Oh my goodness, he felt a kindred. He realized he was a kindred spirit. Realized that, wow, okay, there's something else besides this post-war abstraction that's all the rage here in the US. And in the summer of his junior year, he went to San Miguel de Allende in Mexico. He studied at the Fine Arts Academy there. And while he was there, he studied with a person who had in turn studied with Orozco and learned how to paint frescoes, learned how to paint in wet plaster on a wall, a mural. So obviously deeply influenced by the Mexican muralists. After he graduated from UT in 1958, he attended the museum school, the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston. There were European artists there. And he was impressed with how they were teaching to sculpt in clay. Previously, he had learned that clay is a means to an end. It's not an end in itself if you want to make sculpture. But no, not at the Museum of Fine Arts Boston School. And that introduced Maurice to how he could really be expressive as a sculptor. Like this sculpture that's in our collection is unfired solid clay. So that makes it extremely fragile, extremely heavy, kind of a nightmare to move anywhere. But it was able to retain the freshness of his expression, the freshness of how he saw it in his mind, because of the fact that he was able to just hands-on put it together in that wet clay and let it dry like that. And while he was at that school of at the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, of course, he was able to encounter their collection. At the end of his time in Boston, he went to basic training at Fort Dix in New Jersey. In the Army, he was drafted, and at that time, I think they were drafting young men, even if there wasn't a war going on. He was never deployed anywhere, but he went through basic training, and he talks about how that really gave him a sense of discipline, which turned out to be very important in these coming years that he spent in San Antonio. San Antonio, of course, is close to where he grew up, but he was there to make his art and to become part of the artistic community, to work with and meet other artists. This picture on the left here is from the San Antonio opera series that he did. A friend introduced him to the person, to one of the people in charge at the opera. And he was allowed to go in during the dress rehearsals with his colored inks and his paper. And he had the colored inks lined up in a particular order. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to know what color was what in the dark, because he was over there in the wings while the drama was going on in the light. And he did these sketches. And when the opera was being performed for the public, his sketches were on display in the lobby of the opera house, of the theater. And that way his work was able to get some showing, some public exposure. He was able to get experience. And all of these things were just ended up being very important to him. I love this self-portrait. I wonder, and when I see Maurice again, I'll have to ask him if the home in this picture is the building that should have been condemned, that he talks about, that he lived in while he was there in San Antonio, of course, living and working as an artist. Well, after his time in San Antonio, he decided he also taught at various places, the YWCA, local colleges. He decided, well, maybe I want to pursue teaching. And so he went on to get his Master's of Fine Arts at the Cranbrook Academy of Art in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. Very prestigious academy. And even though post-war abstraction was all the rage, Cranbrook has a very traditional approach and I mean very traditional, in the fact that whatever you're studying, you have to learn the craft and the process of every part of it. For example, the weavers had to learn to make their own dye. The printmakers had to make their own paper. So some of the prints that we have in our collection, it's various kinds of paper that Maurice made by hand before he actually printed on it. And he did his focus at Cranbrook in printmaking. And when I found that out, I thought, well, that explains a lot. That explains why he's such a master printmaker. But it's not just the prints, it's the paintings that I really love as well. And I love this quote here. And I'm going to come back a little bit to the light. One of the things he mentions about the hill country is that the light is very crisp and it defines things. But the light in South Texas is golden and suffuses things. And you might find the same is true maybe in South Louisiana, maybe in Southern France. Maybe that was informing the post-impressionists. It's certainly true if you look at the Venetian painters of the Renaissance and Baroque period. There's something about that light in Venice that suffuses, that changes the color. So it was the light, and maybe a lot of other things as well. But this is Texas A&M University, Kingsville. They're in Kingsville, South Texas. At the time Maurice started teaching there, it was called Texas College of Arts and Industries. And he went on to teach there for more than 40 years. Kingsville is named for the King Ranch, the largest ranch in Texas, and therefore the largest ranch in the United States. As far as I know, the largest ranch anywhere, but it's got over 825,000 acres of land, and their crops are broad ranging. They raise cattle, they raise thoroughbred racehorses, they raise cotton, they raise food crops. So agriculture, of course, is a very big part of this area. But again, it's only just about 20 miles away from the coast. So aquaculture is important as well. And again, the worker at his task. You don't just have the nice picturesque scene of the boat on the water. You've got the worker actually with the shrimp that he's caught. You've got a little bit of a Cubist influence there, and Maurice mentions this in his writing as well, that where you can see multiple components of a scene at once in 2 dimensions in a flat surface. We've got the cattle in the trees. And then this one, I had a different one in there, but I put this one in instead. This was just snapped right upstairs. This one now belongs to this museum. Herdsmen are we. And so again, it's that the title is taken from the Bible, but the scene is two Latino men with a goat in a pickup truck. This is his daily life. This is what Maurice is witnessing in South Texas, but it's a sacred scene. Its origins go back thousands of years. And this is the one I'm going to end with, teshuvah, which means turning around. But in Hebrew, it also refers to repentance, to the act of repentance. And there's so much going on in this beautiful painting on so many levels. I can maybe just barely touch the surface. One thing I want to mention is the color. And yes, the color is vibrant, but notice the presence of all three primary colors: blue, yellow, and red. Those three colors together, that's all colors. That is the presence of all color. And it's like the rainbow. It's like God's symbol of the covenant with Noah, the compassion of God on mankind. And Maurice mentions color in his book as covenant. He talks about that. He talks about the rainbow and the covenant with Noah. He also talks about the colors that were in the tabernacle, the purple, blue, and scarlet, and how those are important elements in his work as well. And it's a guy on a tractor, but it's so much more than that as well. Turning from darkness into light, completing his task, growing food to eat. We're just so privileged to be the caretakers of so many of Maurice's works at our museum. Also to be able to share them with museums like yours. I think if you've read the materials in the exhibit upstairs, if you've seen the show, if you've watched the video, you know at least as much as I do about Maurice and his work. But the difference is I've had the privilege of meeting him. He is one of the loveliest people you will ever meet. I also have the privilege of caring for these wonderful works and being able to see them in person all the time. It makes my job pretty darn great. It's a pretty inspiring place to work. Thank you again for letting me be here to share that with you, and I'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
I'm going to let folks here think about questions. I always have a question. Unfortunately, it's the Baroque question. You set it up. You said that how did San Angelo get the Baroque, the Mexican Baroque pieces, and now I'm really curious.
Oh, okay. Well, they came from several different collections. The first collection of the Spanish colonial art we got was from a collector in San Antonio in 2009. And it was a lot of smaller pieces. It was a lot of folk art. And then let's see, just a couple years later, we found out about a collection in possession of, it was another collector, but she also happened to be an art restorer. And she herself was Swiss, but she was living in San Antonio at the time. And she had collected those very large paintings that you saw on display in El Paso. But when she got them, they were in horrible condition. The Villalpandos, there was the larger rectangular format ones. There was one in the picture in El Paso, but we have another one in our museum that's even larger than that. When she received them, they were folded up, dried out completely, and I don't know what kind of condition the paint surface was in, but herself being a restorer, she went through the very painstaking process of rehydrating them, even to be able to open them, unfold them, get out the creases, then to give them the TLC they needed. The same with the Torres, the lunette shaped paintings. She restored those, or at least was able to begin the restoration process. We had it completed by another restorer once we got them, because she had moved back to Switzerland by that time. But I think the case with both collectors was that they saw an opportunity to be able to begin something at a smaller institution where their name and what they had collected would not be lost, but would also be seen, would be appreciated. And not that it wouldn't be appreciated at the larger institutions for sure, but I think they saw the opportunity to build something. And that's why those collections came to us. And since then we've received other collections as other collectors have heard about our collections. Well, they say, hey, would you be interested in this? And we've received gifts from maybe 5 or 6 donors now, 5 or 6 major donors in the Spanish colonial area. So it was not even on our radar before the first collector offered his collection. And since then it's become a focus area.
So thank you.
First, I want to say your presentation was just so lovely and wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
And it was a pleasure to listen. I'm curious about Maurice's life, that his family, his grandfather and great-grandfather, where did they come from? I mean, how did they end up, how many years ago? 200 years ago, 100, in this little town in Texas? I mean, how did they get there? I mean, where was his great-great-grandparents?
I wish I knew. So actually going through the exhibits here at this museum, I wondered the same thing, and that's something that I'm going to have to ask Maurice. I know in his film he mentions his, I think his mother's parents, or his mother's mother was Hungarian, and he mentions her. But as for his father's family, the Schmidts, and how they started the dry goods store, I wonder if it's very similar to some of the families that we read about in the main gallery.
Funnily enough, somebody on the Zoom said that he is a childhood friend of Maurice, and their families were very close. It brought a profound respect for European culture, the origins of his mother and my parents. So I've now asked him if he knows anything about Maurice's childhood and his background. Don't know about that.
Story in the book where he says that his grandfather wanted to open the store because he was Jewish. They were iffy about it, and then a German gentleman who lived there already kind of helped him set up.
Yes,
that's what I read.
Yeah, so it goes back to the founding of the store, but really not any further than that. So I would be interested to know as well.
I also am fascinated that you're in a town of 100,000 people. With your museum is just mind-boggling. That is just spectacular.
It's a real privilege to work there, that's for sure. When I moved to San Angelo 11 years ago, I was astonished. I mean, not only to learn how vibrant the artistic community is in a, well, it's not necessary, well, 100,000, well, it's big compared to other places I've lived, but in the area, there's really nothing else around it. So the museum serves like a whole vast 18 county region, all that rural area around, but to find that there was a museum there, and then such a great museum, and to get hired there was pretty wonderful.
How has Maurice's like Jewish works been like expressly Jewish works been seen in San Angelo? Is there a decent Jewish community? Is this the first time that people are interacting with Jewish ritual stories?
Not necessarily. I would say the Jewish community in San Angelo is small but fairly vibrant. It's very active just in the community in general. I wish I knew for sure what more people's reflections were about the works in particular, but the exhibit was very well received. I don't know that everybody is as enthusiastic as I am when they first see it, but the more you see it, I think the more enthusiastic you become about Maurice's work. It's just one of those marks of a great artist, that the more you look at it, the more you appreciate it.
I'm mindful of time, so I'm gonna give folks an opportunity to consider another question, especially our folks online, because when we finish this conversation in person, or then we can still chat, but some very kind comments coming in the chat that I will save and share with you. Any other final questions before I end the recording, honestly? Okay. Before I end, I'm going to be a disembodied head for a moment. This is the museum team here at the Museum of Southern Jewish Experience. And I want to thank you all so much for being here. Please follow us on social media to find out what's next here at the museum. The best way to do that is to sign up for our newsletter at msje.org/connect. And we look forward to seeing you guys at the next event. And most importantly, we want to thank Laura for generously giving her time and insight into the art and life of Maurice Schmidt. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.